Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we pull apart the most critical insights from your source material.
And today, we're tackling something I think everyone has felt.
Oh, absolutely. Our mission is to figure out why everything from a weekend DIY project to, building a new railway always seems to take way longer and cost so much more than we plan.
We are diving straight into the battle between our own optimism and, well, cold, hard reality. The authors have a term for this, right? The planning fallacy.
The planning fallacy. I'm intimately familiar with it. I tried to build a simple shelving unit a few weeks back.
Oh no, let me guess.
I thought maybe 45 minutes tops. I think I spent the first 45 just looking for the right Allen key. It's just, we're all terrible at this.
We really are. And that failure comes down to two really different ways of looking at a problem, the inside view and the outside view.
Okay, let's break that down. The planning fallacy itself is what?
It's basically any plan that's, way too close to a best case scenario. It's a plan that completely ignores the statistics of how similar things have gone before.
Right. And the anecdote from the sources, the one about the curriculum project, that's a perfect example of the inside view.
It is. The team looked at their own situation, their own skills, their enthusiasm, the fact that they'd already written a couple of chapters.
They felt good about their progress.
Exactly. They thought, hey, we've done 2 chapters, there's only 10 more to go. 2 years max. But that focus is a trap. The authors call it WISII.
What you see is all there is.
Right. You're only looking at your plan, your team.
Yeah.
You completely ignore all the unknown unknowns.
Like illnesses or bureaucratic nightmares or people getting divorced. Stuff you can't plan for.
All of it. So they landed on this super optimistic 2-year estimate. But then the expert on the team, Seymour, he was asked to switch his thinking.
To the outside view. And that's where you ignore all the specifics of your own project, which that feels kind of insulting, doesn't it? Why throw out your own careful plan?
Because the plan is often just wishful thinking. The outside view forces you to be humble. So Seymour ignored his team's enthusiasm and looked at the reference class.
So other teams who try to do the same kind of thing.
Yes. And the base rates he found were terrifying. A 40% failure rate.
So a 4 in 10 chance they wouldn't even finish.
And for those who did finish, it took them 7 to 10 years.
Wow. Okay, so that 2-year plan suddenly looks, well, completely delusional.
And it was. The project actually took 8 years, and then it wasn't even adopted in the end. The data was right all along.
So why do we do it? Why do we cling to the delusion?
Well, that's where we get into the psychology of it. It's all fueled by a really pervasive optimistic bias.
We just think we're better than average.
Most people do, yeah. We see our own skills as more favorable, our goals as more achievable than they really are. You see it so clearly with entrepreneurs.
Oh, the stats on that are wild. The sources say that 1/3 of new business founders think their chance of failing is literally 0.
0. When the reality is that the 5-year survival rate is only about 35%, it's a level of self-deception that drives huge risks.
And when that bias hits public projects, the cost is just staggering.
The Scottish Parliament building.
Yeah.
The initial estimate was what, around 40 million?
And the final bill was roughly 431 million. That's more than 10 times the original estimate. It's the price of a collective delusion.
And it gets worse when you add in what's called competition neglect.
So we're so focused on our own brilliant plan that we forget other people have plans too.
Precisely. You focus on what you can do, your skills, but you completely neglect the skills and plans of your competitors. It's why everyone piles into the same hot market and then wonders why nobody's making any money.
Okay, so this is a disaster. What's the cure? How do we fix our broken planning brains?
The technical fix is reference class forecasting. It's just a formal way of using the outside view.
So instead of navel-gazing, you find your reference class, say other big railway projects, and you look at their actual data?
You find the real statistics for cost and time overruns, and you use that to build your baseline, not your own hopes and dreams.
That makes so much sense. And there's another great tool mentioned, a partial remedy from Gary Klein called the premortem.
Yes, I love this idea. It's so simple. Before you commit to a big decision, the whole team gets together.
And they pretend it's a year later and the project was a total disaster.
A complete catastrophe. And then they each have to write the history of how it all went wrong. It's brilliant because it sidesteps all that pressure to be optimistic and lets people voice real concerns.
It makes it safe to be the pessimist in the room. So, the big takeaway for you, listening, is what? That confidence isn't always a good thing.
I mean, we value it so much socially, But an unbiased appreciation of uncertainty, admitting what you don't know, that's the real cornerstone of being rational.
But the expert who says, I'm not sure, often gets pushed aside for the one who sounds confident, even if they're less accurate.
It's a tough problem, and it connects perfectly to what happened with that curriculum team. Even after learning their project would probably fail, they just kept going.
Trapped by irrational perseverance.
Which brings us to our next deep dive.
Next time, we're exploring the emotional and financial traps of the sunk cost fallacy. We'll get into why losing money hurts so much and why it keeps us stuck in ventures